Hello everyone, welcome to Audiobookish. This is an audiobook review and discussion podcast. My name is Ved Ram and I'm here with Poppy Knight.
Hello.
So today's book is A Slow Fire Burning, and the blurb goes as follows. Laura has spent most of her life being judged. She's seen as a hot-tempered, troubled loner. Some even call her dangerous. Miriam knows that just because Laura is witnessed leaving the scene of a horrific murder with blood on her clothes, that doesn't mean she's the killer. Bitter experience has taught her that how easy it is to get caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Carla is reeling from the brutal murder of her nephew. She trusts no one. Good people are capable of terrible deeds. How far will she go to find peace? Innocent or guilty, everyone is damaged. Some are damaged enough to kill. Look what you started. And do you want to read out the bio for the author Paula Hawkins?
Yeah, so this one is written by Paula Hawkins. Paula Hawkins worked as a journalist for 15 years before turning her hand to fiction. Born and brought up in Zimbabwe, Paula moved to London in 1989 and has lived there ever since. Her first thriller, The Girl on the Train, has been a global phenomenon, selling 23 million copies worldwide. Published in over 40 languages, it has been a #1 bestseller around the world and was a #1 box office hit film starring Emily Blunt. Into the Water, her second standalone thriller, has also been a global #1 bestseller, spending 20 weeks in the Sunday Times hardback fiction top 10 bestseller list and 6 weeks at #1.
And Slow Fire Burning was released on the 31st of August this year, and the audiobook was read by Rosamund Pike. So I've got a few thoughts initially. I just want to kind of generally just get out there at the start. I really enjoyed Rosamund Pike's performance. I thought she read absolutely beautifully, and one of the things I really enjoyed, so the audiobooks kind of wrong foots you right at the start, because it starts off with
Yes.
a story within a story. Rosamund reads out a chapter from a book called The One That Got Away, which is written by one of the characters within the book. What's his name again?
Theo.
Theo. So Theo is the author of this book. So you're immediately wrong-footed about what type of story this is going to be, whose viewpoint it's being told from, which I think is also really important theme that runs through the novel. Just I really enjoyed the way that she narrated, and I really enjoyed that beginning part as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think she did a really good job. I thought she was really expressive and engaging. I mean, obviously you'd expect that from, the acclaimed actor that she is. I did, as a slight tiny criticism, I did find that sometimes the voices of the different characters weren't the most consistent. Sometimes some characters sounded like the other character sounded a bit ago, and I felt like, and especially male characters, I felt like they often sounded quite similar. And yes, sometimes I was like, that character doesn't sound like they usually sound. But that's the only criticism I can give of it. I thought, the expression in everything, in the pacing that she did was fabulous. And the voices were really good. It was just that, consistency, I guess, that sort of shook me a little bit, if I have to say one criticism.
I agree with that. I think Rosamund's got such a beautiful voice. She's got the sort of voice that would become a horde of marauding barbarians. She's able to imbue the text with such emotion and
Yes.
tenderness and anger and rage and hurt that it seems a little bit churlish to criticize her. This is a story that's set in London. I do think she struggled with some of the London accents,
Right.
especially some of the male accents, as you mentioned there. Some of the male characters did kind of blend into each other for me a little bit, but her reading of the main text outside
Yeah.
of the character work is just wonderful to listen to. So I think it's one of those things that we've talked about before, where I don't know whether it would have been a nice idea to have maybe a more full cast production where you've got different actors playing different roles and just having Rosamund narrate it, but that would have taken away, I think, something from some of the female performances that she the performances of the female characters that she had, which were really excellent all the way
Yeah.
throughout.
Yeah, I was going to say kind of a similar thing, actually. I think I've been listening to a lot recently, and I think we both have, that has been very performed, and I do really love that in my audio stuff. And I needed to kind of click my brain into realising that rather than performed, this one is being read. And that slightly different thing of we're not expecting to be transported into that place as if we're listening in with our ear, close to them. It's that we're actually being read to, and I kind of needed to remind myself that's a completely valid and enjoyable way for books to be translated into the audio format, and especially in a book like this where the narration is so heavy. It does have dialogue in it. It does have a decent amount of dialogue in it, but unlike some other things, it is led by that narration, the description, the detail, where I think it being read to you is maybe a better choice than this, like, performed to, either by one person or multiple people. And I think the only thing we've said about, like, those slight bits of does this sound like the right character or whatever is more someone being on top of that, and I guess asking her to say that again, either when that's in recording or afterwards. But have now an insider knowledge into how audiobooks are made and the tight production schedules and and deadlines on them, I can totally see why the meticulous detail that obviously in a perfect world we would love was maybe not possible in this one.
Yeah, and just to echo your thoughts, there's a lot of narration in the text, and a lot of it is the internal thoughts of the characters.
Yeah.
And I think it was absolutely the correct choice to have one narrator read this out. I'm not sure it would have justified a
Yeah.
multicast
I think that would have been
thing.
more clashy, wouldn't it, really?
Yeah, it would have been more clashy. So the other thing I wanted to mention really quickly is how well written all the characters were. So I
Yes.
really loved all the female characters. I loved Miriam. I loved Irene, even though she said something that really upset me later on
I know what you're talking about.
in the book.
Yeah.
I quite liked Carla and Laura as well. They're all, in their own way, they're all difficult. They're all deeply flawed characters that do things that are unpleasant to themselves or to other people. You can't help but kind of grow close to them in a weird way. So I was just wondering what you felt about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I made a note that the characters are what make this book, definitely, in the characterization for sure. And I think when we go into potential spoiler territory, if we dig down into each character, because I don't necessarily agree with you on Miriam, but I fully percent agree
Oh,
with you on Irene. But so we'll talk about that. We'll go through them all. We'll dissect
okay.
them later. But I
Okay.
totally agree. Yeah, characterization is really what it's the crux of this book. It's I'd say the best thing about this book, really, for me, the text certainly at least, was that it was quite a lot about people and about families and about relationships, rather than, or in addition to, it obviously being a crime story. I know obviously all crime has a social kind of side to it, but it very much felt to me like you could take out the crime case, the body who's found, certainly the first body that we hear about being found, out of this, and you'd still have a really interesting book that's maybe not a crime book, but a book about interconnected families and people and stuff like that.
I completely agree with you. I don't want to say the murder's almost superfluous, but
It's a
it's
little bit though, I get you, yeah.
these characters, bumping along and interacting with each other is really what drives the tension. It's not an action-packed book. There's not lots of action scenes, or there's not a lot of violence described. Well, that's not true. There's not a lot of. I was going to say there's not a lot of violence described within the book, but it's not
Not
one of
kind of
those
as it
actually.
happens.
Yeah, not as not as it happens, but the tension comes from how much information the characters are going to be revealing to each other, and how much of themselves they're going to reveal to the other characters. I feel a lot of tension in the book comes from that, and a lot of the
Yeah.
stakes are just how the characters view each other, which I
Yes.
found really interesting as well. So those are the things I wanted to kind of talk about initially. What have you got on your notes?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, coming off that, I wanted to comment that I do think Cliffhanger's done very well. A bit like how we commented for True Crime Story, a really good job of dropping something in for you to then go, oh, what do you mean by that? But then, oh, wait, you gotta wait 2 chapters before you hear about that. Kind of really clever stuff with that, which I thought was, really good. Yeah, I mean, speaking of chapters, I did like how they were basically 15-minute chapters a lot of the time, which was nice. It's a nice bite-size kind of thing that you can go through. So yeah, if that's a selling point for anyone listening, I thought that was quite good.
It's almost kind of reminded me of Gundren. is kind of like almost a perfect length of listening to
Yeah, no,
something. Yeah.
definitely.
So yeah.
And then also generally, I mean, this book has been pushed really hard. You know, if people listening are following publishing things and bookshops and stuff on any socials and stuff, you'll see how big this is pushed. Obviously, because of The Girl on the Train was such a massive hit. It's even, I follow, I think we spoke about this before in like the pilot, but I follow some Norwegian publishers and bookshops and stuff like that, and even they've been posting about it. And I mean, given how big crime is over there and in Scandinavia in general, the fact that they're championing this one to their readers is, you know, presumably a pretty good sign. But yeah, I hadn't read or watched The Girl on the Train, and I haven't read yeah.
Neither have I. Neither
So
have I.
there you go then, guys. We're coming into this completely fresh, so we can't say if you liked that you'll like this or whatever, but just a completely fresh one. And if you do have any thoughts on how you thought it compares, feel free to let us know, because we would find that interesting. The other thing I wanted to just say as a last thing to anyone who's unconvinced before we get into spoilers as to whether they want to go and listen is that we kind of talked in the last episode, go listen to that if you haven't, because we love true crime story, about how that was like a really good book for crime lovers, serial crime listeners and readers and watchers who were also wanting something that was really experimental and messes with the form, takes advantage of the audio and all that sort of stuff. This is not the same kind of book, but I think if you are a serial crime lover, you know, you get all the crime books as they're coming out, you know, there's a load of people that do that, then there's no reason this should not be on your list. You know, it's definitely one to add on to there. And if you like crime but in a more dabbly way, I think it's definitely one you should consider. It was pretty good.
I would echo that. I'd not read any of the previous books. I hadn't read Paula, The Girl on the Train, or into the water. I think I will probably actually check them out now
I'm tempted, yeah.
after reading this. Yeah.
Yeah, the writing was really good, and it just felt like it had done the
Yeah.
crime genre really well without being, you know, stale and too much like everything else, but like a comfortable like everything else, I think is maybe a good way to describe it.
Yeah. I think it's got plenty of tension. The characters are really well observed. It does keep you guessing, as well as to who did or didn't
Yeah.
do certain things, whether certain people have strange ideas about what is actually
Yes.
real and not who to trust and who not to trust. So it's got all those elements that you'd want from a crime thriller. Great characters, great writing, well written dialogue
Yeah,
as well. So
definitely.
I think what me and Poppy agreed was we talk in general terms, non-spoilery, because there's no real way to talk about the book without getting into
Yeah.
spoilers. So Poppy, is there anything else you want to say before we give like the spoiler
Yeah,
klaxon?
so I was just going to say one last thing before we spoiler. This is kind of a spoiler, but it's a spoiler that I think people need to be aware of. It does not pass the dog doesn't die test. And
Oh,
I know many people, my mum included, will do the thing for films where you like check that website that asks about that. It does not pass that test. So I guess that is the one reason why you wouldn't put it on your list if you're not going to be happy with that. Because yeah, I was not happy with that. I'm trying to forget about it and overlook it, but I needed to let you know before anyone listens to it and then is upset by that. So yes, it doesn't pass that test, just so you're aware.
so I wasn't aware of that such a
Oh,
test
yes, there is
existed.
a website. I can't remember what it's called, but there is a website. I think it's just called Does the Dog Die? And basically, if any animals die in a film, it will flag it up on there, or the film will say, no, you're all good, no one dies. No animals die in this one. So yes, for animal lovers, it's
Okay.
a great thing to check out.
Okay, so spoiler klaxons, guys.
Yep.
Spoilers from here on out. Spoilers,
If you've
spoilers,
listened or you
spoilers.
don't mind spoilers,
Your last chance.
then you can keep going. If not, listen and then come back.
Okay, so spoilers 1, 2, 3. Let's get into spoiler territory. So where do you want to start with your spoilery
Well, should we maybe go
discussions,
characters then?
Poppy?
Should we go through them and what we
Okay.
think of them?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Who do you want to start with?
Okay, so let's start with Miriam, because I think we've got slightly different opinions on Miriam.
Miriam, for those who haven't read it but just don't care about spoilers, for those who haven't listened to it but just don't care about spoilers, describes herself in her own internal monologue as not being likable to other people. Other people don't find her likable, they make assumptions about her, they think she's this, that and the other, and yeah, a busybody, a nosy person, quite abrupt, unfriendly, untrustworthy, various things. And I guess you might be able to describe it better, but my stance on it was that I understood that, and I understood what she meant about being judged, and I understood the stuff about how experiences in her past have definitely contributed to that, and her difficulty making new friends and connecting with people because of the traumatic experience that she went through. And therefore I wanted to like her, but she still just rubbed me up the wrong way. I don't know. That's
I can completely understand. I can completely understand that. So Miriam's got this. I can't like the way Miriam talks about herself is kind of is sort of like very
yeah.
self-depreciative, self in a very self-depreciating way. She talks about herself, as you mentioned, not being able to make friends. She's got quite a negative view about her personal
Mhm.
appearance. I think she makes assumptions about what other people think of her, and I think because she makes those
I
assumptions
get you.
come true
Yes.
in a weird way. And she does some awful things have happened to Miriam. So as I mentioned at the start of the book, opens with a book within a book called The One Who Got Away, which is an account of two girls who are kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and one of them is killed. And that is based on Miriam's true life. It's kind of a true life account of what happened to Miriam when she was
Mhm.
younger. And I think that's
Yeah.
the key event in her life. It's one of those weird things. Does trauma justify your bad behavior? And she does some really horrible
Yeah.
things in this book. The aforementioned puppy
No, stop
that
it.
was
Stop talking about it.
that got
That's
yeah,
probably the main
and
reason why
that
I still don't like her.
the puppy thing was bad, but the way she turns on Laura for
Mm.
me was just unforgivable. It was just really, really, really horrible,
Mm.
horrid thing to do.
When she
So
had
yeah, so
stolen something
I yeah,
from Laura, which is what Laura is saying, yeah. I'm aware she didn't want her going through her stuff, but equally, you did steal that.
yeah. So it was kind of one of those things where I don't say like her. I feel about her the same way as I'd feel about Omar from The Wire, in terms of I understand that she's got a certain way of behaving and I understand why she behaves that way. Would I want to spend any time with Laura
With
in a
Miriam, you
friendly
mean?
capacity? Probably not. But as a character, I really just enjoyed watching her scheme and trying to get her own way, and that justifiable
Yes,
vengeance that she's kind of plotting against Theo all the time. So I really like it when people are trying to take
mm,
revenge on other people. So I think that's probably why she endeared me a little bit closer to my
that's
heart
fair. We
than
know you
to
love a villain. We've
yours.
been over this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I certainly the revenge that she takes at the end, you know, was I'm on board with that. On her attacker, but some of her methods for how she wanted to get back at Theo and just outlook on it, I guess. I think it's one of those things that, like you were saying, a lot of it's written in their perspective, like their thoughts. And I think it was just that. It's the fact that okay, you think outsiders judge you, all right, but we are getting the insider. We're getting what you're actually thinking, and I'll be honest, I don't like that much either. It was sort of where I ended up on it. Yeah, certainly not any sort of like hatred of her, but didn't like so much.
Yeah, I can completely understand why you'd feel that way. I think maybe the next character we should come to then is Laura. How did you feel about
Yeah, I liked
Laura?
Laura. I did really like Laura. And I think that's the one where it was certainly very helpful for you to hear her internal thoughts. And you could understand how she struggles with the fact
Because
that what is going on internally for her isn't what everyone else perceives. It's kind of a very similar thing to what Miriam
yeah, because
complains about. But I think, yeah, in that case, I managed to kind of see that a lot better, that conflict between those two identities in a way, sort of.
I completely agree with that, and because otherwise the stuff that she does is so erratic that she just you can see how other people would see her as just a crazy person. Like some of the stuff that the kind of the breakdowns she has outside the laundrette after she loses her job, the way she can't
Yeah.
help but laugh when she's in trouble, which to be fair is something that happens to me
My gran is
as
so bad
well,
for it.
kind of
She's
laughing on.
listening. I know she is. She's so bad for it. She laughs when people hurt themselves, and she's trying to say sorry, but she's laughing too hard. Yeah.
Yeah, so her getting her internal
Mm,
monologue to kind of understand what was happening inside her head and why she had such poor impulse
yeah.
control was really helpful. I had so much
Oh
sympathy
God,
for
yeah.
her situation. There was one thing about the her storyline that I didn't appreciate, and it's nothing to do with Laura herself, but it's just, can we get rid of this evil step parent trope? Her stepmother just seemed like, the
Yeah.
typical stuck up second wife that doesn't want anything to do with the children that she's marrying into, and I just think that's I just think it's a little bit damaging to be honest with you. I just think there are lots of blended
Yes.
families that operate perfectly nicely, and stepmothers that are really nice people. So maybe if we can kind of get rid of that trope a
I
little
think
bit.
that's
I don't
totally
know.
fair. And if I'm honest, I don't think she added a whole lot to the story. I think she could have been done away with, to be fair. I mean, I guess there was the stuff about her then, it being a barrier between her and her dad. You sort of thought that her dad did
Yeah.
want to help her, but couldn't. So I guess maybe that's the function that she serves. But yeah, I think, like you say, it's kind of is everything going to be like this tropesy thing? And there is an issue with this one of, Laura's brain damage, her mental impairment, and the way that is used in crime books is something to be considered. It's not always used in the most responsible way, I guess, is something to say. But
I
where the
I felt that the portrayal here was quite sensitive.
Yeah,
To be fair,
I'm not
I
laying
think
judgment
it
on this
wasn't. Yeah,
particular text. I'm just kind of,
yeah, yeah,
with you talking about tropes, it is something that can be
yeah.
considered a trope, and yeah, that is maybe something that is, yeah, it's something that is used in the genre, and questions about how that's used are, around and worthwhile. I think with the stepmom thing, I think what's a lot more important is her relationship with her biological mother,
Yeah.
who really let her down in a number of ways.
Oh, oh, that's
Yeah,
mildly let
and
it down.
I think that relationship sort of could have just taken the brunt of the evil stepmom ones, which I hadn't thought of in such a cartoony way, but now you say it, I do see that. But yeah, I think that could have, instead of splitting those two things across those two people, I guess maybe could have, yeah, focused those issues on the mother more.
The stepmother being a barrier to for Laura access, because a lot of Laura's narrative is about how she doesn't
Yeah.
have the
Mhm.
support that she needs to function. I think having the stepmother there as a barrier to that support was
Mm.
probably a necessary plot contrivance. It's just earlier this year I read Bright Burning Things by Lisa Harding, and it had a similar
Mhm.
plot device in that, and maybe there might have
Yeah.
been a better way of
Yeah.
dealing with that. And Laura is a very funny character. She's a very
Yeah.
caring person as well, but she obviously what happens to Laura in the book is when she's 9 or 10 years old, she's run over by a car and she breaks her leg. She suffers a really bad injury, and part of the reason why she's been unable to recover from both the physical and the emotional fallout from that is that the car was being driven by her mother's lover, who her mother then went on to
Mm.
marry, and that has just been a devastating
Yeah, and the fact
effect
that her
on
mum
her.
had told the guy to drive off. So it was originally reported as a hit and
Yes.
run, but actually she was trying to cover up this. Certainly how we're told it, he would have wanted to stay around and help and wanted to make sure she was all right and everything. But yeah, she covered it up because she chose him and she chose her dirty secret over Laura. Is a big thing. I thought it was interesting how we've now had two books, these two penguin ones on the trot, where a girl has a car accident in the past. I thought that was an interesting
Yes.
coincidence. That's not something
Yeah.
I would have pulled up as one of the tropes of crime, but I mean, it seems to be in these two. No, but I mean, you also said with saying plot device on for that about the stepmother. I guess that's sort of quickly going back to it. What I was meaning with Laura, conditions like that sometimes used for plot device reasons, ideas of this kind of erratic behavior and stuff like that used to for various reasons of stuff in crime. But yeah, I thought that was interesting how the car crash is was in both. What's the chances?
Yeah, and how that's kind of had really bad effect on both
Mm,
characters kind of later on. The really important thing I think flows through both Miriam and Laura's story is how both of them have struggled to get over trauma that's been in the past and how lies have kind of compounded that
yeah.
trauma. So I think for Miriam, the lies that she perceived is that, oh, why did you not stay with your friend?
Mm,
And in her mind, that's everyone's telling her you did absolutely the right thing. But in her own head, she gets the message that you should have
mm,
stayed with her. And with Laura, it's just kind of the lies that both her parents told
yeah.
her about what had happened
No,
to her.
definitely.
Laura
I love Laura.
is
Yeah.
she, yeah, I think Laura's, I wouldn't say a lovely character, but is someone that all the characters in the book, her and Irene are the two characters that you really want everything to work out
Definitely.
for. And, especially later on in the book where Laura is in serious jeopardy from the law. You just think,
I
don't do
know.
this to
I
her.
know.
She's been, been through enough already. So I think the next character probably worth talking about is Carla.
Mm,
So how did you feel about
yeah.
Carla?
Now this is within the context of, remember I said all the characters are amazing. That is the best thing about the book. I guess she's the kind
Yeah.
of least standout character for me, I guess. But I think in a kind of way, I can't like sum her up like her personality, if that makes sense. But the main thing with Carla, and I think this is fair to say, is how she is haunted by the death of her son. So her son dies as a very young boy. She is understandably extremely affected by this, and that is a theme of the book. And massive spoiler again, it's what leads her to kill.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really know how to sum her up as a character and as a person, and I think a lot of it relies on thinking of what do you think actually happened, which I think we're going to talk about in a bit. I was wanting to bring up, you couldn't not sympathize with her with what happens, and what I especially really liked is she's talking about how this all comes about because she decides to go back to work. She goes back to work after the birth of her son, and she is going away for a conference or something like that. And she's really looking forward to the time away. And Theo, her husband at the time, is insistent that he wants to be with her, that they should take the whole family and make it a big thing, where actually she kind of wanted the space. But he was so insistent, and she was like, we can't take the kid. He was so insistent. She was like, okay, he can stay with my sister. And that is when the incident happens. And what I really liked about that was the point about she couldn't take the toddler because if she did, everyone would say she can't cope, she can't do a job, she's an irresponsible mother. Whereas if Theo had taken the child to a work thing that he had, oh, isn't he an amazing dad? This wonderful man. And I thought that was a really, important comment that was in the book. Those gender differences there. I was a big fan of that being mentioned.
I read part of an interview with Paula Hawkins, and one of the things she mentioned in the book, one of the themes in the book she mentioned is that runs through is the way that society
Mm-hmm.
judges women, and kind of with the way society judges a woman that looks like
Mm-hmm.
Miriam, the way the society judges a woman who behaves the way Laura behaves, the way that society judges someone like
Mm-hmm.
Carla, because they don't represent necessarily those aspects of femininity that society expects to be on display, kind of being caring and nurturing and all that other sort of stuff. For me, Carla is a character that's defined by her relationship with other
Mm.
people within the book. I found her relationship with Theo quite
Yeah.
odd and weird, the way that her relationship with her sister, the way she behaved, her relationship with her son, her relationship with her nephew. She's, I don't want to say put upon, it's kind of she lets those other relationships define who
Mm.
she is rather than having her own identity, if that makes sense. And it kind of goes back to the comment that you made earlier on about how society would have viewed her if she'd taken her son to
Mm-hmm.
work when her son passed away. Kind of her identity was wrapped up
Yeah.
in that in that relationship as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's talk about
Yeah,
Irene. Sorry,
no, that's
you
what
were
I
going
was
to
going
say
to
something
say.
before that.
Yes. I mean, let's be honest, she's the hero of the book, and I love her to pieces. And it
Yes.
feels like an injustice to me that the bio that you read out, the bio on the blurbs on everything, doesn't have her in it, as if she's not as major as
Y-
all the other ones. I love Irene. She's fab. I really like Irene, and she saves the day because she's a legend. This is my thoughts on Irene.
So I really loved Irene's character. I love the way that she looks out at the
Mhm.
world. I love the way that she kind of understands what other people think about her, but she doesn't really give a
Yeah.
toss. I love how she uses the fact that people underestimate her to her
Hmm.
advantage sometimes. I love the fact that she's got this almost unconditional love
Yeah.
for Laura as well. She knows Laura's stolen from her.
I want to say on that actually quickly, that reminded me a lot in that moment, which is really nice, of again going back to the pilot, the book I listened to called My Name is Leon. A very
Yeah.
similar kind of thing where I guess caregiver in some senses, someone who cares for you in a quite a maternal way, even though these aren't biological or kind of things, that kind of motherly figure, seeing that the behaviour isn't a knock on their character and loving them, like you say, unconditional love. But yeah, I think I just wanted to pull out how that was a similarity that I found in that it's seeing the person behind stuff like that, not taking it personal that she'd stolen, and understanding why, and that unconditional love. Yeah.
Yeah, and the only knock I have on Irene
Yeah,
as a character, she does make the comment that comic books and graphic novels aren't real books. How very dare you, Irene? How
I
very dare
know.
you? They it's just what a horrible, awful, untrue, misguided
It
thing to
is
say.
misguided. That's the
And
thing.
it's
Irene is of a different generation and is aware of
oh, a
judgmental.
different generation. Oh, it's all coming out
No,
now.
but as in has been brought up to think that reading you have to. She'd probably be dissing us for listening to audiobooks, to be honest. But I think this
Yeah,
is just that
yeah.
Irene is uneducated in the joys of different formats than anything to actually hold against her forever. I think.
I think yeah, she's a great character, and the way two things that really stood out to me were the way that she
Hmm.
treats Laura, and she's a really brave
Yeah.
person as well. Kind of like some of the
Hmm.
risks she takes
Yeah.
later on,
For
and
sure.
she's a really she's just extraordinary. So I think
Yeah.
those are the
Well,
four
so
female
on
lead.
Irene as
Yeah,
well, she's kind of responsible for two of my favourite moments, I think it's fair to say. So one is just genuinely quite a cute one, but also, I don't know, they're both about grief. Grief is obviously a massive theme in this book. There's a lot of death. You know, aside from the main murder, there is a lot of death that goes on, and grief is a massive theme. And I think it is done really well. Personally, I thought. And yeah, two moments. So, because one, where she was talking about the fact that she was given her neighbour's pile of books, which so happens to be Carla's sister, and how she was talking about how Angela, this neighbour, would, write in the margins and stick different things in as bookmarks and blah blah blah. And she talks about the importance of how that felt like such a connection to her. You know, these weren't just a pile of old books, like Carla said. These were memories. They were like having a conversation with her, she says. And I thought that whole passage was really, really wonderful. Even though I tend not to, unless I'm studying it, write notes in books and things like that, and it shivers down my spine. I did really like that as a whole situation. I guess it really stood out to me.
and there was another moment that you
Yeah, and
mentioned
then the
as
other
well.
one
Yeah.
was the description of how she lost her husband and how she was dealing
Oh
with that
God,
was
yeah,
so heartbreaking.
yeah,
And in one of those ways where it feels weird to say, "Oh, it's my favorite moment," because
yeah.
obviously it's really, really sad and really heartbreaking. But that's the point. I think it was so affecting for me. I was like, "This is really well written." So yeah, she,
Yeah,
as well as being an amazing character, she sort of brought about those two moments that I thought were some of the highlights of the book. Really.
I think another highlight just from the passages that Irene was involved with, just kind of the description of what it feels like to be
Mm,
elderly and get be old and kind of lonely as well. All the stuff about her kind of body aching and not really wanting to go out to the shops, having this. I don't say desire, but this instinct's the wrong word, but this thing inside you that wants you to kind of slightly give up about things and just kind of like lie there and be confused, because when you're confused, you're not remembering the fact that this man that
Yeah.
you've loved is no longer there. That was really, I think that was really, really
Yeah.
touching.
Yeah. It was really sad.
Yeah. So I think the two other characters, the two other main characters we haven't really mentioned yet are
Mm-hmm.
Theo and what's the name of the murder
Yeah.
victim, Daniel. So for a murder book, kind of like Daniel's not really a main character, I don't think. In a lot of ways, it's more about
Yeah.
what his death kind of like kicks off. But Theo is definitely a major player in the
Yeah,
book.
so Theo, I think it's very safe to say he's a piece of work. It's another one where I felt it
Yeah.
was a bit odd that the blurb, because with me having seen it before as well, finding it odd that it fixates on these three characters when, like you say, I think it's the five of them that make the book. I understand this focus on the women and how they're viewed, but yeah, I do kind of feel like he gets words, he gets airtime, and he is a significant character in it, and yeah, a piece of work. Some might argue that there's good intention and it's love based, but it felt very creepy and manipulatively and obsessive love based rather than noble love based stuff. And obviously, so with being Carla's husband, he did go through the same loss of the young child as well, but he's a piece of work.
Theo, he's got. I really didn't like his relationship with
No.
Carla. I understand there's a lot of water under the bridge in their relationship. They've been through some really, maybe one of the most horrific
Yeah.
experiences any couple
Hmm.
can go through. I just felt, I don't know, it really sat
Yes.
uneasily with me, kind of the way that he looked at Carla
Hmm.
and felt about their relationship. I think there was almost this, I don't know if it's not abuse, but there's kind of this thing in their relationship where Carla didn't want to let him down, and Theo would just expect Carla
Hmm.
be there, sort of thing. And I mean, let's kind of like get the cat out of the bag right now. Kind of Theo's relationship with Miriam is a lot of the stuff that happens to Theo he deserves, because he's done something absolutely horrible to Miriam. I'm not entirely sure if the dog deserved to pay
God no.
for any of that. The way that he treats Miriam, the way that he treats Irene
Yeah.
later on in the book, the way that he's prepared to let throw other characters like Laura
Yeah.
underneath the bus to protect himself, are all kind of like quite despicable
Yeah,
characteristics.
definitely. And the stuff with
And
Miriam, how
yeah,
so basically Miriam writes about her traumatic experience that we talked about, writes a memoir about it, doesn't show anyone, ends up having a friendship with Theo, who is a writer, and goes, you know what, this is the person I'm going to entrust with my manuscript. He runs away, commercializes it in glorifies it, writes his own book, doesn't give her any credit, stops speaking to her, and claims he never even read the manuscript. So yeah, not good.
we can all agree that plagiarists are not very nice people.
Mm,
I think it's just kind of like it's what, as someone who writes a bit and who creates, kind of having someone just steal your material, I can imagine would be quite hurtful. But to someone to steal your one of the key moments
yeah.
in your life and not give you any
Hmm.
acknowledgement at all is, just really, really
Hmm.
awful. I wish I could articulate better why that his relationship with Carla made me feel so
I think it's
so
maybe
uneasy.
you kind of mentioned how you said the phrase "it's not abuse," and I think it's because their relationship really toes that line between things that some people would consider totally fine and not a problem, and others would recognize as signs of abusive relationships and controlling behaviors and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that's the word that I was
Yeah.
looking for, is controlling
Yeah,
behavior.
it definitely
Yeah.
has the potential to be an abusive relationship. I understand why you didn't want to categorize it as that as such, and I think maybe that is where the unease comes from. It's not a good relationship in any way, and yeah, it definitely has the potential to be very not good.
Yeah, and I think it turns out to be very not good for both of them. Let's chat a little bit
Yes.
about Daniel. We don't get any of his internal monologues. We only get to hear about him through the way other
Yeah.
people view him, which I thought was kind of quite an interesting choice by Paula Hawkins, not to
Yeah.
give the victim a voice in his own sort of like narrative, I suppose.
Definitely, I thought about that. You're left at the end, or certainly I was, torn between two versions of events. You've got one where Daniel witnesses the horrific death of his nephew, certainly as his cousin, sorry, certainly finds the
Cousin,
body,
yeah.
is at a young age, is traumatized by this, his toddler cousin has died, struggles to cope with that, acts out because of it, equally is not treated well by his alcoholic mother, and one of the ways that he tries to deal with this, all these things, being mistreated by his mother and having witnessed that event and that trauma, was in this graphic novel that he created, which portrays him as a villain who actually killed his cousin. The flip side is, you think that's actually what happened. He did actually cause it. He has been tricking people, Carla mainly, into thinking that his mum is bad to him when actually he's the one that's bad to her. He then concocts nastiness, inappropriateness with Carla later, and he's altogether a 1000% manipulative, horrible person. And I honestly don't know which one or where on that spectrum to think.
I just have to kind of echo your thoughts that we
Yeah.
don't really know who Daniel is. We know he's certainly done some pretty horrible things. I mean, the way
Yeah, he treats Laura mean,
he
so we hate
treats
him, so
Laura, we
that's alright.
know
We can agree on
that.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So he treats Laura quite badly. That's the only account of his behaviour that I
Yes,
trust,
agreed.
if that makes any sense. Everyone else's accounts of what he may have not have done in the past is suspect or maybe untrustworthy because everyone's got their
Yeah.
own angles. Kind of the accounts that his mother wrote in the letters, kind of like, oh, he's acting impossibly. We don't really know if that's because he's just being a really difficult child or because Carla was an alcoholic single mother that was just genuinely struggling to cope. The way that Theo looks at him, he doesn't want anything to
Yeah.
do with that side of the family as a result of what happened to their son. And Carla's kind of like stuck somewhere in between. The only thing we do really know about him is that he did kind of like take kind of
Yeah.
make creepy drawings of Carla. And I was just kind of like, that was the one theme where I couldn't really not understand, but I didn't know where to fall on the line, whether that creepiness was being reciprocated
Mhm.
by Carla. So that's the other kind of strand that
Yeah,
kind of
definitely.
is left
Is that what,
hanging
when you messaged
there
me
as
about
well.
it gets weird? Is that what you were talking about? I thought it was when I got to it. I
Yes,
was like, this is
yes,
what he means.
yeah.
Yeah, because I got to the end of it and I don't think anything actually happened. My interpretation is I trust what Carla says or thinks, recounts, that
Yeah.
she woke up and he was just there in her bedroom drawing her, and he has then sent them to Theo in a way that makes it seem more like that. I got a bit confused by that because there was something where Angela was going to show Theo something, and then I think he just leaves the house without her showing, and we don't actually get told what that was. I was really confused by that.
So my interpretation of that was that he was this is my interpretation. My interpretation of that was that the graphic novel was in the graphic novels or drawings of Carla were in
Okay.
the cupboard. So that's kind of my interpretation
Right.
of what happened there. So I think he might have been maybe because so Daniel he creates a graphic novel uh, recounting, so basically showing himself to kind of murder his cousin and having sexual feelings towards his aunt, kind of his aunt's drawn really kind of like, if I remember correctly, in a kind of sexual way throughout the books. I think that might have been it,
Yeah,
kind of maybe
maybe.
showing
It kind of
those
confused me because,
drawings.
like, it
Maybe,
was Theo that came to Angela with the drawing that he was sent, the one that we hear about from Carla as to how it
yeah,
happened. But then he tells people later that Angela told him that they were having sexual relations. So I don't know if I missed something there. But yeah, I sort of came away from it thinking
yeah,
more of what Carla said, that there wasn't actually a sexual relationship between them, but that he clearly had some unresolved feelings that were, potentially inappropriate. And yeah, it kind of boils down. There's definitely things about Daniel that are not great. There's that. There's the way he treats Laura, things like that. And I think on that kind of polar, which one is it? It's that kind of, do we think he's an evil, manipulative mastermind kind of person, like he portrays himself to be in that comic book, or is he damaged from that experience and coping with it badly and having been affected by it? I think that's where.
yeah. Yeah, it's one of those. Even with Carla towards the end, that kind of it leaves you a little bit on
Yeah.
a cliffhanger about what her exact motivations for doing what she did were. I think not Theo, Daniel. There's obviously the thing with, I say the thing, the death of his cousin, which he was there to witness. But there's also the fact his that mother and his dad kind of had a really
Mhm.
dysfunctional relationship as well. It was kind of unclear how functioning Carla was before the
Do you mean
death of
Angela?
her nephew.
Mhm.
Into not Angela, sorry, how Angela was functioning, because there were hints that she was untrustworthy and reliable. Feels very reluctant to leave them,
Yeah.
leave their son with him. So it's kind of, you do get to think that there was a dysfunctional relationship there already, which was
Mhm.
just completely destroyed after the deaths. But yeah, he seems like to me, my interpretation was that he wasn't necessarily a mastermind. He was just a guy that made
Mhm.
some really bad
Yeah.
choices. One of which was treating Laura badly, so
Mhm.
fuck him for that, and kind of this weird
Yeah.
blackmail thing that he was trying to do against Theo. I don't understand. I didn't really understand the leverage that
Yeah,
he had there.
it was
I don't
peculiar.
understand what he
Yeah,
was
it
trying to do.
definitely was.
Yeah,
I mean, complete guess of but it maybe feels a little bit like, because he was clearly not happy, as you said, with Carla having any contact with that side of the family. He didn't want any contact with that side of the family, and given that Carla was a positive influence on his life, perhaps he is, resentful to Theo for holding it all against him and not letting him see his aunt as much as he wants, or you kind of go, there could be something of that in there as to why he doesn't like him. But yeah, it's
yeah.
strange. It's strange, and yeah, I think I'm erring towards thinking that Daniel didn't cause his cousin's death, but I don't know.
We really can't be sure what happened there. And just going back a little bit
Mm.
back to the blackmail plot. This is kind of set in modern days. I mean, if you was going to kind of blackmail someone
Mm.
with sexually explicit things, you wouldn't necessarily take a drawing. You would probably take a snap on your mobile phone, especially
Yeah,
if
quite
he's kind of
sinister in that way,
undressed
wasn't it? That it was
Carla.
drawn.
So yeah, I don't know what, because if you've drawn a picture where I don't know. It's just a weird thing. So we've been chatting for about an hour about this. I think this would be a great book for a book club to kind of read and discuss, because there's a lot of meat to kind of discuss in terms of how you view and understand different characters and what the events that happened in there. Was Daniel responsible for
Hmm.
his cousin's death? Certain things that Laura and Miriam and Irene get up to as well. So for me, this is a really surprisingly enjoyable
Yeah,
book.
yeah, no, I really liked
Yeah,
it as well. And very quickly, what you were saying about modern times, I thought it was kind of cool.
yeah.
Not in any way to the same extent of truth in True Crime Story, but the fact that there was like real world events. So there was like Salisbury poisoning
Oh yeah.
stuff and Bottomgate with Hancock. Um,
What was the other thing that really, I think, tickled me was that awful May
yes,
woman
yeah.
is also mentioned as well.
Yeah. Oh no, wait. Sorry, the Bottom Gate thing. That was Jeremy Corbyn one. I'm thinking of a more recent Bottom Gate.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Jeremy Corbyn one.
Let's not talk
No,
about the recent Bottom Gate, please. It's just
yeah, but yeah, so I thought that
gross.
was really interesting. And then yeah, like you say about book club questions, I sort of have one for you a little bit. You can maybe give a quick answer if
Yeah,
we don't
yeah,
want to wait too long. But I
yeah.
so the tagline is "Look what you started," and like I said about the Norwegian ones, if my translation is correct, I believe that one translates more to "What have you done?" And obviously, I don't know much of the subtleties of that phrase in Norwegian and stuff. So if we just take it as blanket, like, which do you think fits better? Either "Look what you started" or "What have you done?" And if I'm honest, I'm not sure either fit for me, but maybe I just don't get the book. The taglines make me think I don't get the book. What's your thoughts?
So I think let's actually look at the title. So it mentions in the book that a slow burning fire is kind of when a book crumbles apart from kind of the inside. So I think my understanding is what have you started is a nod to that. Have you started the path to decay?
Okay,
I think is
interesting.
what the book is about. It's a bit of an odd. It is a bit of an odd tagline, but I think it is one of those standard taglines that you do get
Yeah.
in crime thrillers as well.
Yeah, no,
So
it's just
yeah.
interested me because I wasn't kind of sure when reading back on both of those, either "Look what you started" or "What have you done." I kind of couldn't pinpoint it. I mean, I guess the idea is that it applies to a lot of people, but still, I never felt like starting or doing and not meaning to do, which is sort of what I get from "What have you done," or like
Oh
starting
yes.
anything. I never felt like anyone actively started something or anyone did something that they should look back on and wonder about. It felt strange to me, but I get you
So,
that it's
see,
kind of it's the marketing tool,
yeah.
isn't
So
it?
the yeah, I think the only character that really applies to is Theo,
Mm,
because he started something in stealing
yeah.
Miriam's story that I think without that, then basically all the action in this story doesn't unfold the way that it does, because without him stealing that story, he doesn't get the successful the successful novel that he produces. He doesn't have the same life. Miriam doesn't hate
Mm,
him and try to do horrible things to him. So I think that's the only character that really applies to in that. I mean, there are things that I don't know. Maybe it does apply a little bit more because there are things that Miriam does at the start of the book in terms of like hiding evidence and
yeah,
that sort of thing as well. So maybe it does apply a little bit more
yeah.
specifically than I
I guess
initially
it's just that
thought.
kind
Yeah.
of idea of, either if you're saying "look" or "what," it's kind of the idea that they should be, they didn't mean it bad, but look, it's turned out bad, kind of thing, which didn't
Yes.
seem to sit with
It's the
anyone.
sort of thing you say to a naughty
Yeah,
child, isn't it? It's the sort of thing you say to a naughty child. Like, look what
yeah.
you've done.
Whereas I feel like
Yeah, yeah,
in the most cases, people reacted in an intentional way to stuff. Even if they regret it later
yeah.
or don't regret it later, they acted in a very intentional way, which then feels odd for those ones. But yeah, just wondered if
Oh, we should have mentioned this at the start. This was an advance
a
review
review
copy
copy.
from Penguin Random House Audio. Thank you very much to Chloe, who sent over the last few books that we reviewed from Penguin Random House. It's really greatly
Yeah, thank you so much.
appreciated. And yes, this is a recommendation from me. If you want a superb thriller with excellently written
Hmm.
characters and lots of tension, this should be straight up your
Hmm.
street.
Yeah, I think I can echo that.
Okay, cool. And the next book that we are going to do,
The
if
next
I can,
episode, the
if I can,
interview.
yeah, the next episode we're going to be interviewing Kelly Ergen. She is an editor and publishing hopeful, and we're going to be chatting to her about some of her favorite audiobooks and her career in publishing as well.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, thanks, guys. Please rate and review the podcast wherever you find it. Use the link at the bottom to send us some cash if you want to, or use the affiliate link to start your own podcast, and they'll kick us some money as well. Thank you,
Thank you so
guys.
much.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.